thank you again, man. You've done so much, and you all have heard it real life, his experience, and where we've been. But I always like to start off with a definition. What is trauma informed care?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I think that this particular term gets
Mm,
misconstrued often. So I'll start off by saying that trauma informed care, or to be trauma informed, is not a place but a
mm,
way. Oftentimes we think that there's a misconception that we can just take a course, get a certification, and we'll be
right.
trauma informed. But informed is a way. And first, in order to become trauma informed, you have to be
Mm,
trauma aware. Uh, Once you're trauma aware, you can become
mm,
trauma sensitive. And once you're trauma sensitive, you can become trauma responsive. And once you're trauma responsive, you can start the journey of becoming
I like
trauma
that.
informed. And when we think of trauma informed, we're thinking that we understand what trauma is and how it impacts not only ourselves, but the ecosystem around us
Mm,
and everyone that we interact with. I like a saying that I often say during my trainings is that we are all doing the best we can with what we have, especially when
mm,
it's ugly. Which is sometimes tough to understand, but what it does is it honors the journey of individual lived
right.
experiences. And trauma informed is a way of doing such in everything that we do. You can have trauma informed care, you can have trauma informed reactions, you can have trauma informed everything. It is an
Mm,
ecosystem. It's not a waypoint. It is a
wow.
waypoint.
And talk about some of those practical examples. I mean, you just broke it down by steps. I went straight for the big enchilada, but it's steps that gets you there before you get there. And talk about, yes, what examples do you have out there that you've used?
Yeah, yeah, really good example. Let's say when I was teaching at the
Hmm.
alternative school, there oftentimes what you'll find with many educators is educators are a lot of times they're tired. They're tired in the classroom. They're tired of administration. They're just tired in general. Uh, and after many years, sometimes individuals can become jaded. They can become jaded with how young people react and their
Mm,
responses to things. And what we started to see was not only were they having these particular reactions, but we also noticed that they also brought stuff in their bag as well. So there's a song by Erica Badu,
mm,
"Bag Lady," and I oftentimes reference
mm,
this in my training where Erica says that she says, "Bag lady, you gonna hurt your back carrying all them
mm,
bags like that," right? And what that means is we have trauma, we have lived experiences, we have things that we hold in
mm.
our bag that we are unable to let go. And when we are unable to let go, not only do we hurt ourselves, but we start to bleed on other people. And sometimes in education, sometimes teachers bleed their frustrations out on other teachers and on the
Wow.
students. So, an example of utilizing trauma
Mm,
awareness, because I'm very key on using trauma awareness instead of the word
right.
trauma informed, because
I like those
there
steps.
are different
Please keep
steps.
saying that. Thank you.
Yeah. So, trauma awareness. So, one of the things is we understand ourselves and our own lived experiences. What am I bringing to the table? How am I showing up today? One of the questions that I ask, and this is a great example of what trauma informed looks like, is whenever I'm having a consultation, particularly around workforce development or a one on one career opportunity, I always ask, how are you showing
Oh,
up today?
wow.
That is a trauma aware type
Hmm.
of questioning because I want to know who you are, how you're showing up before we can do anything else because your lived experiences, your now matters.
Wow.
So that's an example, one example of how one can show that they are on the journey of being
That's so
trauma
key
informed.
because you talked about the teacher. Everybody look up to the teacher to have all the answers, to be always having it together and all those things. How do you how do you help a leader who's, who's going through it, but they still got to press through the organization and work, but they still going through the, how do you do that? That was a good example.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it starts with
Mm,
listening. It
yeah.
starts with listening. Oftentimes, I remember again, and I'm going to bring anecdotes from the
Okay.
classroom, but I remember when I was teaching, and I would tell my students, I am both the teacher and the learner.
Whoa.
And that
Yeah.
would throw the young people off. Like, oh man, what do you mean you're also the learner? Which means I am learning from you. I'm learning about your resilience. I'm learning how you show up. I'm learning from your experiences as well. And when we're talking to leaders, oftentimes our first thing that we have to do is we just have to
Well, okay.
listen. I am here to listen. Because once I can hear you and I can start to understand your positioning and where you're coming from, then we can start to unpack. It is not my job to
Mm,
change you,
yeah.
right? That is not my journey. My job is not to change you, but to give you the tools necessary for you to grow and ascend on your own. But we can't do that
Man,
unless we're
that's,
listening.
oh,
And I
I
start
love
off,
it because a lot of people think practice makes perfect, but you saying listening makes perfect. It helps you.
yeah. And brother, truthfully,
Right,
nothing makes
right,
perfect, right?
right, right. You
Nothing
know that
makes
they do the
perfect.
adages,
But
but that listening can make you,
right,
yeah. Oh wow, that is so important with how you just broke it down to make it more of what we'd like to talk about. And in doing this type of work, the listening part, and then you talked about something saying, I'm listening to you because I'm still trying to learn. And once you can break it down, like you said, trauma awareness, and then move through your steps, I think it's so key because does that mean that what you're teaching and how you're doing it, a certain age, you have to be a certain age to understand what you're doing around trauma informed care? Do you have to become an adult first, or do you start with middle school or elementary school? Can they be part of what you're doing?
yeah, and that again, man, you're coming with some really good
Mhm.
questions. So I am on my last semester in my master's in community health and
All
prevention
right.
science, and one of the courses that I took was on lifespan
Hmm.
counseling, where understand the different levels of one's life. And what I will say is that while there are certain concepts that are beyond elementary understanding, I believe that we can start in elementary, but we have to be extremely focused and intentional about what we're focusing on or what we're teaching. So, for instance, with elementary school students, I think that they are still in the developmental stage where they're learning who they are. They're learning about how to say yes and what to say no to. They're learning. They're exploring the world. They're literally still in a stage where they're just trying to figure it out. And what we can do is cultivate a space that is safe, loving, and understanding for them to do so without having
Mm.
reprimand. Right, reprimanding them in a negative way that will ultimately stifle them from exploring the world a little bit more as they get older. Now, as we get older, I've had different training sessions with high
Okay.
school students. High school students are literally, that is the level that I really have excitement with when it comes to this, because they are in the middle of where they are learning themselves, but they can also now see the relevance in the conversation. I'll give you a cool example. I was giving a training once during a summer youth employment session for the city of Atlanta. And one of my young people said that she got in an argument with her sister or a sibling. And the only thing that she could think about or hear was me telling her that we're all doing the
Oh
best we can with what we have in the moment, especially when it's ugly, and we all deserve empathy and we all deserve
no.
grace. And she said that allowed her to really take a step back and hear her
Mm.
sister. She said she didn't really agree with her, but she could hear her and she could understand her point and where she was coming from. And that, my friend, is the power of trauma awareness and trauma
So
awareness
part of it
training.
is talk. That's. I want to get to my next question, which is measuring your success, and that right there was so powerful because that lady, that young lady was able to use what you taught in that classroom. May not necessarily agree with you, but she said, "Huh, let me step back and see." And so, how other ways do you measure success?
Yeah, that's a great question as well, man. So I believe that success in this work isn't
Okay,
a number, right? It's not a number that you're going to
right.
find on a chart. It's often a moment, like the moment that I shared, right? It's a shift, a choice that someone didn't make before they had the information. So, of course, I utilize tools and feedback loops and observations and post assessments, pre assessments, all of those things. But real transformation doesn't always look
Right.
immediate or external. I believe that it comes in
Okay.
ripples, right? It's not just a
No.
splash. When someone makes a different choice, or someone is able to say no, or set a boundary, or someone leads with
Mm.
compassion instead of
Hmm.
control, I believe that's a win. That's how we can start to see that this is working. Because it means that something moved,
Right.
right?
Right.
And, and that movement is something that lasts, not just in the moment. It's something that lasts lifelong.
Man, you keep I'm keep trying to get through and ask. I got all these questions, but you got me going back. Is trauma informed care, is it, can a rich person, a middle class person, a poor person, do all of them go through all of this, or is it just in one set group? With
Ah, that's a good question. You come with a great question. So, reality, we are all experiencing things by definition, and I'll be loose when we think about the
hmm
word trauma, the SAMHSA definition of trauma. But I think that it is when something overwhelms our body's ability to
right.
cope with something. By definition, that's simply put, that's what
Yeah.
trauma is. One of the things that I often share with people, particularly during my trauma awareness training, is that trauma comes in many different ways. We have acute trauma, we have community trauma, we have intergenerational trauma, we have
Mm.
historical trauma, we have all types of trauma. And what that means is we are all,
Come
or
on.
have all, experienced a form
Okay.
of trauma. You say acute trauma. I broke my arm when I was 11. That is an example of acute trauma. If you were in a car accident, that's an example of acute trauma. But community trauma, we've all experienced what COVID looks like in one form or fashion. That is an example of trauma. So there is no
Mm.
age, there is no specific person, there is no financial demographic. Everyone experiences a form of trauma at some point in their life, but how
That's
they
the key.
deal with it, how they cope with it, that is the
And
key.
that's what leads me to your 6 hour class, because talk about how in your class or in your teaching, your seminar, how do you teach people to cope? Because right now, man, I'm just walking around, I see a lot of people in the zombie like state. It's like that you no
Yeah.
empathy, you're immune. It's like folks saying whatever they want to say. They seeing everything on TV. Everything's like the video game that people are watching where the heads get cut off and all those things, and you just like in suspended animation. Talk to us about that, because your 6 hour course, and that's why I wanted to talk about age. I wanted to talk about, did it matter what age you were in? Did it matter about if you're a leader or not a leader? Because what Aaron is offering can transform any generational group, age, social economic status. But talk about, how do you deal with the coping part as part of your 6 hour seminar?
Yeah, so with my pedagogical background, right, teaching middle and high school, and teaching adult education, I also taught in the prisons. I taught at what is Fulton County
Mm,
Jail. I've taught at county jail, I taught GED, I've taught adult education, I've taught all around. And there are different pedagogical techniques that one would understand on how to facilitate to different crowds. So I understand that for my young people, I'm not going to just give them a straight 6-hour training, right? We got to chunk that up so that they can absorb it. And for adults as well, like it's never like I break the 6 hours up so that we can all absorb it equitably. So the bigger than that is how we break down the 6-hour training. We don't just talk about trauma, right? We break down trauma, but we also break down the brain.
That's it.
We break down the brain where we understand how the brain directly is impacted by trauma. What does it mean to have fight, flight, freeze? What is PTSD? What is a trauma response? What are these things? Because I understand the power of language as well. So once we start to break down the brain and why the brain acts in certain ways and why we respond in certain ways, and understand that our brain literally is built in certain aspects where we automatically respond based off of the way our brain was just developed in the womb. In the womb, not even outside of the womb. So when we break all of these things down, it makes it easier for people to understand that they're not different. That this is not, you are not an outliner. You are not someone who's just experiencing something on your own, that we are all experiencing a shared journey. And when I can start to help people to see that, that's when we can start promoting empathy, where we can start to try to be the catalyst for empathy in others, where we can start to promote grace. But it starts with understanding not only the words and terminology, but then taking off the stigma of trauma. I'll leave you with this, and then we can go to the next question. I don't like to say that people are coping, right? I like to say that people are utilizing their survival skills.
Come on.
That way we can
utilizing their survival skills.
But we can honor that, right? So the goal is not to diminish. So I remember there are individuals who may utilize drugs. They might smoke weed, or they might drink alcohol, or they might have these unhealthy survival skills, right? But they still deserve honor, because when I can honor your survival skills, I can break down the barrier and the stigma behind it. And then we can start having conversations around exchanging those unhealthy survival skills with healthy survival skills. And I've actually seen it in practice and have data from actually doing it in community, where we said, hey, we know that smoking, you've been smoking for a long time, you've been drinking for a long time, but hey, when you're stressed out, have you ever heard of have you ever heard of yoga? Have you ever heard of capoeira? Have you ever heard of Tai Chi? Have you ever heard of these things? And people are like, no, like I'm not doing that. But then when we started giving it to them for free, they slowly started to try it. We started to see a change. Like, well, maybe I won't smoke today. Maybe I'll do some belly breathing when I'm mad. Maybe I won't yell at you. Maybe I'll step outside and do some grounding. Maybe instead of cussing you out right now, or maybe, in fact, you cursing me out, I won't take it personal. Maybe I'll start to look at it and say, hey, she's just experiencing, or he's just experiencing something that has nothing to do with me, and they're just doing the best they can. How can I learn to hear through the behavior? I don't want to treat the behavior. I want to treat
That's right.
the trauma.
That's right. Oh, boy, you just helped me, because coping and now changing it to survival skills. Talk about some of the misconceptions, because your words, and you talk about words have power. Now you're helping me to listen and understand more. What are some of the other misconceptions, or just words people use that we should change our language when we're dealing with people around?
Yeah. So I would really encourage people not to call people crazy, because crazy is dismissive. It's dismissive of lived experiences. It's dismissive of not only lived experiences, but when we break that down, it is experiences that people have overcome. I was talking to a friend recently where I said, everything that you've ever worried about, you've overcome. You're here. We can't truly say that we're on the journey of being trauma informed, or we're being understanding, loving, and empathetic when we dismiss people's lived experiences through calling them crazy. It's okay for me to disagree. It's okay for me to misunderstand or not like how you're responding to something, but I can't not dismiss how you are showing up. I first have to honor that so that I can uncover why you're showing up that way. And more importantly, so that I can encourage you to uncover why you're showing up that way. And then I'll mention this, and I mentioned this earlier, and I'll be quick with this one. The misconception that you can be trauma informed after a class. That's not the case. Trauma is a way. I look at it like martial arts. So I also practice Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and a couple of other martial arts. And one of the things that you learn is they say that once you get to, let's say, the black belt, they say that that's when the training actually starts. But it takes 10 years to get to black belt. So the idea is, if we align it to being trauma informed, it's a lifestyle. It is not a waypoint. It's a lifestyle. So misconception is that, hey, I can take this trauma informed course and now I'm good. No, you gotta read some books. you gotta do some self work. You might have to go get some therapy. You might have to look in the mirror and cry a little bit, be in the shower and cry. But that is part of the journey of being trauma informed.
Wow. Okay, part of it is just talking about real life. You heard about Aaron's journey and how he was in elementary school and juvenile detention teaching, came out to the community, graduated from Clark Atlanta. And I always like to talk about your entrepreneurial journey, because I don't know how you started off and then all of a sudden now you got your own business. What was some of the ups, downs, and all arounds that you had to go through to get to the point where, okay, it's time for me to do my own thing?
Yeah. So I would say that there were no downs, right? Because I've changed the way I view my journey. When I started the organization, I started in around 2020 during the pandemic. I was working as a manager for a workforce development program, and we ended up being, it was COVID, so we were working from home. And I started just developing tons and tons of collateral, and I was just developing stuff. And I said, hey, I'm developing all this stuff, and my work stops with the organization. But what about the people who I'm able to touch outside the organization? So then I started this thing on Zoom and on Instagram called Mindful Mondays, where I would jump on a Zoom call and I would just express how I'm feeling. And I created a safe space for people to just talk. And at one point I had like 70 people on a call at 9 o'clock in the morning. And I said, well, goodness, man. I got all these people around and I'm talking about trauma and I'm giving them safe space to kind of unpack and see themselves. Why don't I create something where I can really do this? So during 2020, I started the organization and I just ran it part-time. And part-time, I would just help people with their resumes. I would create safe space to have one-on-ones. I would talk about trauma training, or I would just open up a space to converse. And most recently, I had the epiphany. I said, why don't I just focus on the whole thing? Why don't I just give it my all? I can't say that I have given it 100% until most recently, because most recently I created a space for me to just do that. And in doing that, I found liberation, and I created opportunities for liberation for other people, mental liberation, emotional liberation, spiritual liberation. I am not the one who is opening the door, but I am providing you with the tools for you to not only find more tools, but for you to free yourself.
Wow. What would you say? Because a lot of Blacks are not into this field that you are in, or underrepresented groups. What are some of the ways that you look at? 'Cause you say you didn't have no downs. You just had these were learning experiences. How do you help them who are trying to find their way in a field like this?
Yeah. Man, to be honest, it starts off with you understanding and you honoring the lived experiences of
Okay.
everyone. Like I can't. I say that over and over. I don't want to be sound like I won't say whatever. But I don't want to just keep repeating it. But it starts off with honoring people's lived experiences, because once I can honor your lived experiences and I can see where you're coming from, we can then start to have a deeper conversation, right? I say like, hey, I am not. I look at my life and say, well, I didn't have the downs when it comes to building my organization. I didn't just wake up and feel this way, right? I didn't just out of the blue say, hey, I don't have any downs. No, of course I had downs, but then I started to change how I spoke, how I speak about my life. And then I started to run tests. I said, well, I read somewhere from there's a prominent writer, Scoville Sheen. There's another book called As a Man Thinketh. There are many, all these books, right? And I started to kind of test them out, because I don't just believe anything that I read. So I said, let me test it out. Let me change my words. Let me change how I talk to myself. Let me change. I won't say, darn it, you're so stupid, Aaron. I'll say, darn it, that was difficult to learn, but I'm learning it. And as I started to really try to reframe how I'm living my life, I came to the conclusion that everything that we believe is true. So why not start to believe or create masterpieces? Why not become a chef? Why not create something that you really like? As opposed to me thinking and saying negative stuff, I'm just going to become a chef and create positive stuff.
That's some good gumbo there.
Exactly. I'll say this: if one can reframe their experiences, they can reframe their life.
That's it.
If I can reframe how I'm experiencing this world, then I can reframe how I'm navigating and moving through the world. I'll give that example again. It's not the person cursing you out.
Right.
It's oftentimes not the person. It's their trauma. So, but you have to be able to reframe the conversation to not take it personal. But I'll say this, let me put this caveat out here. Just because you are empathetic and you recognize people are traumatized and you're traumatized doesn't mean that we allow for bad behavior.
It'll be a doormat.
We have to love ourselves and know when to walk away, know when to leave things alone. But we are more empathetic and understanding.
But what happens, because the homicide rate is really high in our Black community, domestic violence. How do you break through all of that? Because man, you're doing some great work. But every day you watch the news, there's still multiple shootings. There's still just things going on that look like it's more self-inflicted than actually other people doing it to us. What do you do in that world when people have that thinking?
Yeah. First off, I look at data, right? As a prevention scientist, I also one of the main things that I focus on is the data. At one point, there was I'll call this confirmation bias. So we have to understand, and I'm going to try to make this as quick as possible, but oftentimes there are erroneous data points that are shared that we just believe about ourselves that are not actually true. Right? So you may hear something like, hey, if you can't read by the third grade, you're going to prison. Well, if you just Google that, that's not true. They're not creating jails for you because you don't know how to read it in the third grade. But we've heard that so much and so often that we just believe it, right? We automatically believe it, even though it's not true. Then we hear things like, oh man, there are more Black people in prison than there are in college or graduating from school. Well, if you do a little bit of research, you realize that that's not true either, right? So when we start to really delve into the research, and I'm not just speaking off the top. I literally, I think a couple of weeks ago, I was doing some more research where I looked at FBI data. I looked at all of this different data, and it showed that from a demographic perspective, if we're looking at Black and brown people, for instance, there are less Black and brown people in prison than there are another demographic of individuals. But you won't hear that, which means as I started to delve in even deeper, I started to look at the amount of arrest demographic. And what you'll find is we have less arrests than another
Okay.
demographic. But that is not continuously shared. So I say all this to say that it is important for us to be good stewards of the narratives around
Come
our
on.
community.
Come on.
We are the first line of defense on the stories we tell ourselves. Because when we look at the news sensationalizes different behaviors. It sensationalizes death. It sensationalizes pain. But it doesn't sensationalize education. It doesn't sensationalize the growth and the power that this particular demographic or our community may bring to the table. So again, the main thing that I would focus on is I would focus on true stats. What does the data say? And then I would start to really peel back the layers because I believe, and I've shared this before, I most recently put this on one of the platforms, I think it was Facebook, where I said, black on black crime doesn't exist. That's crazy, right? Because when they're like, what? Yes, it does. Look at the news. My cousin was blah, blah, blah. Like, I've experienced, whatever. But it's not black on black crime, it's proximity crime.
Proximity crime.
It's proximity crime. Let's change the narrative. Let's stop saying that it's black on black crime. Now, I love black people, right? I love us. What I won't do is continue to push a narrative that is erroneous. I want it to be true. Now, there's white on white crime, there's black on black crime, there's Latino on Latino crime, there's Indian on Indian crime, but it's proximity crime as opposed to just naming it as black on black crime. And then as we start to really peel back the layers and all this kind of stuff, in order to address homicides and all that, we have to provide people with education, equitable access to education, not just reading books and going to school and all that. When I say education, I mean education is totality. Do you understand do you understand that you're not angry? You're just, do you understand that you're not pissed off? You're just annoyed. Can you have the verbiage to kind of share what you're feeling? Do you understand what a emotion wheel is? Do you still stigmatize going to therapy? Do you still stigmatize taking medicine? Do you stigmatize, like, the more education we have and the more equitable the access to said education is, I believe that is the main influence to decreasing violence in every community.
Come on, man. Now, you see real life why we had Mr. Johnson on here. I mean, he has broken it down. He made it just easy for us to understand and to digest. And that's why we have good people. We bring them on to you. Now I want him to tell us, how do we get in contact with you? And then I want you to give us a nugget of inspiration.
Yeah. So I can be reached at Aaron Johnson. That's AARON Johnson, JOHNSON, at J as in Juliet, M as in Mary, C as in Charlie, G as in golf.org, JMCG, or the Johnson McKenzie Consulting Group. Or you can just go to our website at www.jmcg.org. Take a gander, peruse through the website, and when you want to connect, just click on the Connect tab, and you can get on my calendar immediately. And if I could leave you all with something, it would be that trauma isn't a deficit.
Come on, say it again. Say it again.
Trauma isn't a deficit, it's data. It tells us where the rupture happened and where the healing is still possible. And healing doesn't mean erasing the pain. It means making meaning out of it. It means holding space for people to be, not just form in resilience. And justice isn't punishment. Justice is restoration. It's giving people what they need to be whole, even if they've never had it before. So my truth is that we're not broken, we're becoming. And every act of care, every boundary, every refusal to perpetuate harm is a step toward our collective liberation. And we must keep
We're not broken. We're not broken. This is about awareness. It's about empowerment. You heard it from Aaron Johnson, JMCG. Y'all better get this man. Bring him to a city, a state near you. I'm going to Houston next week, so I know I'm going to be talking about you. I'm gonna tell
I
him we're
love
gonna
it.
get this man down to Houston because you in Atlanta, you in Chicago. Tell my Chicago people, uh, Aaron Johnson, what this man is talking about. He has lived it. He understands it. He comes from the community, and he's able to bring it to all different generations. That's why I had him talk about those things because the fight that we're fighting, the things that we're dealing with, is got to have an intergenerational solution. I did it as an elected official. I never tried to segregate all the groups. I found ways to interconnect us because you cannot live in a community where one age is here, one age is there, one group is here over there.
Come on.
We all was interacting either at Kroger, at the gas station, on the streets, on the highway. We all were connected in different ways. You may have I had a hoopty and you had a Mercedes, but we were still on that same highway trying to get from point A to point B. And so y'all heard it. This is real life with Commissioner Johnson and Dr. T. And you all know it. This is our 34th wedding anniversary. So yeah, we're bringing it to you. We just come off of just a great situation. But you all tune in. I'm coming to Houston. And then I'm back here in DeKalb. I'm going to be speaking at Rainbow Baptist Church for Men's Day on June 22nd. Please join us at Rainbow Baptist Church. I'm going to bring it. My title is Relentless. Relentless. So thank you, real life. Thank you, Aaron. Stay strong to you and your wife. Tell her thank you for letting us have a piece of your time. It's all about us connecting, and we're not through, man. We're going to do a part 2 soon. So thank you, real life. Thank you,
Looking
Aaron
forward.
Johnson.